Hey everybody, Darren here, and for those who know this channel, they know that I'll go quite a long time between uploads as I do my kind of big reviews, but I want to start getting into the habit of covering more games in shorter, first impression type videos, as I can, let a lot of the big releases pass me by when I get bogged down in the reviews that I do. So that's what I'm trying out here. So let me know, kind of what you think. So, Baldur's Gate 3 just released into early access. The first act of the game is available, as are most of the core gameplay mechanics, but it is in an unpolished state. There are bugs, lots of missing animations, and a lot of graphical oddities. The early access is expected to last around a year, but Larian Studios, the developers, said it could take much longer, and it'll be done when it's done. Now, by comparison, their previous game, Divinity Original Sin 2, had an early access period that lasted almost exactly a year, but Larian have also said that Baldur's Gate 3 is going to likely take a lot longer. Now, confession time, I haven't actually ever played Dungeons & Dragons, the world in which Baldur's Gate 3 is set, and I really haven't played many pen and paper RPGs. I'm always really attracted to them, they always look great. The likes of Tyranny, Pillars of Eternity, and Divinity. These kind of big, meaty RPGs with really deep and branching stories. The closest I ever really came was Wasteland 2. I loved that game. It's probably my game of the year it came out, I think in 2014. Now, often what turns me off about these types of games is just the volume of items, abilities, and stats. For anyone that knows me, they'll know I'm just a little bit adverse to getting overwhelmed with information like that. I'm not a big stats guy. I've always been really driven by more kind of deeper, interesting game mechanics rather than being able to crunch the modifiers and percentages to really work stuff out. But for Baldur's Gate 3, I decided, look, I'm going to really try to just embrace it as best as I can rather than complain about it all the time, and take the time to learn what's been thrown at me and see if I can get the most out of it. And I think it's starting to click with me, just a bit. Baldur's Gate 3 is actually quite accessible in terms of teaching you the game, and it's visually very appealing, which makes it quite easy to kind of get lost in the world. Now, I'm going to be doing my best to avoid spoilers throughout this video, but I am going to talk broadly about the setting for the game and the opening scenes, just to set the stage. So, after making your character, the story begins mid-battle on a Mind Flayer ship, where you and several others are being held captive. After coming under fire by Githyanki warriors, the ship takes damage and you break free, making your way to the helm, where you guide the ship back to Faerun and crash landed near a beach. So, similar to Divinity Original Sin 2, you go through a sort of tumultuous event and you wake up on a beach, looking for survivors to join your party. Now for me, I found the High Elf Cleric Shadowheart, the High Elf Vampire Astarion, and the Githyanki Fighter Lae'zel. There's a couple other characters to meet, but your party size is limited to 4, so these are just the characters I took on. Now, each of you have a parasite in your head, often referred to as a tadpole or ithalid, and the parasite is really the binding glue that brings your party together. These people don't normally really want to travel together, they're kind of different personalities, they're different races, there's some tension, but because of this parasite, they all kind of come together. And what it's going to do is turn you into a Mind Flayer. So your party sets out to find a cure or a way to remove it. Now, in the meantime, the parasite causes visions, and it kind of allows you to telepathically communicate with each other. And the game's narrator sort of hints that you may be able to use that to your advantage instead of removing it in the future. So far, the story and characters are pretty great, at least in my opinion. I think they're voiced and written really well, and I'm eager to know more about this invasion and about the Mind Flayers in general. For me, it's all kind of new information. As I mentioned though, the lip syncing is often just not really working, it's just not there, or animations and scenes are sometimes incomplete, with frozen models or camera placements not actually focused on the scene itself or obscured by something, and there's a noticeable lack of any ambient noise, which makes some seals feel awkward and empty and lifeless.
To me. Bury the remains.
The world itself looks awesome though. It's really highly detailed with lots of environmental storytelling to give you clues about what happened in the area. Often you can follow footprints or broken rocks to lead you to a small secret, such as finding a key that'll open a chest or find a secret entrance into a building. Now, exploring the map is a huge part of the fun for me, and different characters do it better. As you move through an area, you'll often spot this little icon above your character's head where they just rolled a die for a perception check, and if successful, that'll uncover something like a trapdoor or be able to inform you about enemies maybe up ahead. As the game is based on D&D, you'll notice that pretty much everything has a dice roll attached to it. I think that it's the first game I've probably ever played where it just rolls a dice on whether you'll even see things as you're just walking around the world. So if you're simply not a fan of RNG, then it's probably never going to be the game for you. I've seen some people say that they just constantly reload the game until they get the outcome they want, but I think if you're doing that, you're just not playing in the spirit of D&D if that's the case. I've actually had the opposite effect myself, where I might have to reload for some other reason, like maybe I died, and then I try to get the exact same outcomes, because otherwise I feel like I've kind of cheated a bit. Now, either way, make sure you save often, because it doesn't save after encounters, so you should definitely do that, or if you kind of clear an area. So let's talk a little bit about the combat. The combat in Baldur's Gate 3 is turn-based, but there's free movement. You're not limited to a grid. Characters have movement points that determines how far they can move or climb, action points which determine a main action, and bonus points for extra abilities. You also have your full inventory at your disposal to throw items, consume potions, and activate one-time use scrolls for abilities. It's pretty similar to the combat of Divinity Original Sin 2, except for how things work under the hood. Now, as mentioned, everything is a dice roll, and stats have been moved around or renamed to kind of suit the D&D world. So for instance, armor in the game actually determines the chance someone's gonna hit you, which is pretty strange, because that's just how D&D works. Instead of armor absorbing damage, it basically acts like an evasion stat. If someone's armor is 10 and you roll an 8, then you're gonna just miss your attack. If you roll a 12, then you will attack, but you have to roll again to determine the amount of damage you're gonna do, based on the weapon that you're using. And some weapons or abilities will roll 3 or 4 times. Now, all of this sort of just happens in the background. If you want, you can expand the combat log to see the breakdown of the rolls and see why things happened. So generally, it is pretty clear, once you understand some of the basic mechanics, what's going on. It's worth noting as well that there's also different sized die for determining different things, which I think is actually really interesting. It kind of changes the weight and outcomes to using different weapons. The numbers on a dice roll are 1-to-1 with the damage you do, so even as someone who isn't super good at crunching stats, when you roll a 5 plus 2, you know that you're just going to do 7 damage. Once you get more familiar with your abilities, you can kind of then just speed up a bit, and you won't really need to pause and read that combat log unless something obscure happens. What's most fun for me about the combat is the use of the environment. Creating oil slicks and then igniting it on fire with magic is just super rewarding to pull off. Dousing flames with water so you can move through an area unfazed. The same is true for pushing enemies. You can just yeet them off cliff edges, which honestly seems a bit overpowered, as there's often areas with large height differentials, and I've never had the enemy do it to me, so it definitely seems like it's your advantage. Height does play a big effect for ranged units though. They can give you a large bonus, as does flanking, and there's loads of complexity and unique skills like scrolls and class abilities. You can knock people unconscious, create distractions, use stealth, and use cover to your advantage. There's poisons and acids and all sorts of hazards, as well as counters and cures to those things. Now, I'm still in the early stages of the game, so there's a lot I haven't tried out yet, but so far it's been pretty manageable, and I haven't come across any combat that's been super higher level than me, so it's all been pretty forgiving and fair in that regard. But it is level-based combat that doesn't scale, so you'll have to make sure that you're appropriately geared before fighting numerous or higher level foes. So just to recap on that pretty quick, the environments, the storytelling, the exploration, and combat are all pretty great. At least I'm having a lot of fun with it so far. Where the game is falling down just a bit for me is with my own personal character and some of the more obscure game mechanics. So the character creation is pretty straightforward. There's 13 different character origins to give you different proficiencies with things, 8 different races, a very small handful of voices and faces to choose from, with a decent amount of customization for hair and features after the fact. And then there's 6 different classes: Cleric, Fighter, Ranger, Rogue, Warlock, and Wizard, each with their own unique abilities and proficiencies. The Cleric and the Warlock actually have varying subclasses and can also swap out their main magical abilities as well, along with Wizards. You can then choose which specific skills you want to take on as proficiencies, many of which will allow you to use unique dialogue options. Now, where I felt the game was kind of falling down was with the choices I was making in quests. I was trying to play as somewhat of a bad guy, someone who doesn't really care for the plight of others. And I chose a halfling with a noble background. I wanted the kind of, a small man complex type guy with delusions of grandeur about himself. I called him Baldur, hence the bald head. But the quests given to you always try to kind of tug at your heartstrings to help people in need. Despite being somewhat of a mean person to people, they just still constantly ask you for more help, and you just keep getting follow-up quests that didn't really fit the options of what you were doing. Now, there also hasn't been many repercussions for killing people either. Nobody seemed to care that I went down to see the town healer, murdered her, and then just walked out as if nothing ever happened. So I'm still early, but maybe just a bit disappointed that there isn't a bit more of a direct karma system. Maybe not direct karma like the way it is in other games, but something a bit more where it's like, well, we know this guy has done wrong. I haven't really felt any repercussion yet. But maybe, just have some sort of more of an interesting way to play as a bad guy. Maybe there will be later as I get further. But for now, I have to report on the fact that I just don't seem to be able to play that way. The other thing I thought was weird was the camp system. At any time, pretty much anywhere it seems, you can end the day and set up camp. You then get to reconvene with your party and talk to them. And you might also get some other important story elements here too. Some people arrive every now and then. Now, for the most part, it seems optional, but it basically allows you to just fully replenish your health and magic. Like I said, you can do it pretty much anywhere. At least, I've never seen the option to not be able to do it. So midway through exploring a cave or building, you can just set up camp, go teleport to another area, heal up, and then just continue what you're doing. In fact, I'd actually split my party and sent Astarion some other way, as he's better at sneaking. But after the camp, we were all just back in the same room together again. So it seems quite abusable. He sort of teleported to an area that I don't think he should have really been able to get to, because he went a completely different way. But it also just takes the fun out of kind of that feeling of preparing for a quest and an adventure. By taking the right supplies, going into a cave or building, and then managing your party so that you all get out successfully. If you can just stop and heal all the time, it kind of takes the fun away from that, I feel. Now for me, I just avoid it. But I think they do need cooldowns between them, or to not let you do it while you're inside somewhere or near enemies. I did it while I was in a room next door to an enemy. I just thought it was a bit strange that you can do that. Now, the last thing I want to touch on is the fact that many people, and I think rightfully so, are saying that this doesn't really feel like a Baldur's Gate game. Now, I haven't played the originals myself, but I've done some research on them, and I've watched some gameplay and listened to people who are very familiar with the franchise, and I think it's true to say that with the limited party size and the change to combat, the game is far closer to a Divinity game than it is to Baldur's Gate. I don't think it's really an issue that big of a deal, but it's still a great formula, and I think it's great that fans get to receive a return to the setting, but I can understand that there are frustrations out there that, with the name Baldur's Gate, comes a certain expectation of gameplay. Of course, Larian purchased the license, so they want to use that name, but I think maybe making it a numbered sequel was probably just a small mistake. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter, but I can totally understand why seeing a dormant franchise revived, but mostly in name rather than in spirit, could upset some people. So is Baldur's Gate 3 a game you should pick up now? No, I don't think so. While I've enjoyed getting to grips with it, and it's after helping me kind of get my foot in the door for deeper RPGs like this, I'd still wait if you're on the fence until the game gets updated or goes on sale. The reality is that it's a single-player game that has a big focus on narrative, but only the first act of the game is present, and even that part of the game isn't yet done. It takes away from the experience to see character models not responding or placeholder animations. And of course, this isn't a surprise. No shade thrown here, not really. It is early access, and I think everyone who purchased knew going into it what to expect, as Larian were really upfront about what it is and what isn't done. Now, certainly, pick up the game if you want to support the developer, but at full price, I just kind of can't really recommend an in-development project, especially now seeing how successful it's being. There's no real fear that they're not going to do the game justice like they did with Divinity, so there's no real reason not to wait. I think it is in really good hands, and if you're new to Larian, you should definitely check out Divinity Original Sin 2. It's one of the highest rated games on Steam, and I streamed it for about 10 hours before, but back then it was just a little bit overwhelming for me at first, but I think I'm going to go back now and see if I can get some free time as I get a better grasp on things. Anyways, that's it for my look at Baldur's Gate 3. I hope you enjoyed the video and found some useful information. I know this isn't necessarily my area of expertise, but hopefully for those who do know me and the games I like, you can sort of align yourself with whether or not this type of game is for you as well. Like I said, I really enjoyed it, but I would just wait until it's more complete and maybe jump into something like Divinity for a very similar experience. If you want to see me cover more titles like this in future, just let me know. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more videos on strategy games and other big PC games like this. Join the Republic on Discord to continue the conversation there. Leave a like or a comment to let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.
We are free. Our freedom is ours, friend.